There we go. Issues there. But it is 5 p.m. on Sunday afternoon. And that means that you are here tuned into Community Conversations with me, your happy host, Nadia Headley. And ooh, do we have some things to talk about today, family? We have some real issues here in what's going on, but we'll jump into that in a minute. So much is so much is happening. So let's talk about it. What is going on in the world around us? Yeah. Um, EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, is being repealed all over the place. I mean, I don't know about you in the community, brothers and sisters, um, but some of us, we had some questions. A lot happened really fast in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. There was a lot of new language being used, and it kind of felt like, okay, there are things that we need as a community so that we can all move forward, but how are these things being done? And we felt the performance in EDI. We felt the box checking behavior in EDI. And so we moved forward, but with a sense of hesitation, a sense of, should we trust this? Like, is this actually the change we've been working on for so long? Is this a change that we've been trying to engender for so long? And all we had to do was wait until someone with a very loud voice and a very strong international presence started to dismiss it and give permission to others so that they could dismiss it. And this is not specific to any one country. We are seeing EDI repeal all over the world. And all of these advancements that we thought we had made, we're being told no. And this is on the heels of, Black History Month was last month. And this is Women's Her Story Month, as we like to say. And we're talking to women all month who are making history now. But while we live in these bodies and speak with these accents and bring our history and our color and our groundedness and our gravitas to every situation, we are constantly in the throes of, do people want us here or not? Are we being tolerated or are we being celebrated? Do we want to be included and made a part of a pervasive system, or do we need to create our own systems? Do we need a seat at their table? Should we be making our own tables? What is it that we need as a community? What do we need to be asking for? Should we be looking for justice and reparations, or should we be building wealth and creating it, building for our last name? What should we be focusing on? But in the community, my friends, we got a lot happening. In Canada, recently, so this is March 18th, just 2025. If you're watching live, go ahead and hashtag live. If you're watching on the replay, hashtag replay. If you're listening through the app on lovebayradio.com, then make sure that you let us know in a message where you're tuning in from. And what you think about all of this EDI repeal that's going on. Tell me, did you think EDI was a good thing in the first place? 1, did you think that EDI was being rolled out properly? 2, and 3, how do you feel about EDI repeal happening all over? So in Canada, a federal judge declined to certify the lawsuit that was filed by Black public workers. The court has now dismissed a $2.5 billion class action lawsuit alleging systemic racism in the public service. So in other words, if you are a government worker, you felt as though you have experienced racism, whether it was direct or based on the limitations set upon you by the system in which you're working, etc. But in an order and reasons document, Justice Joycelyn Gagné said that the case did not have sufficient evidence to meet the class action requirement, um, and said that the scope of the plaintiff's claim simply makes it unfit for a class procedure. Now, I am not a lawyer. I am not well versed in legalese, and I certainly, did not pass a bar in Canada. So I'd love if a Canadian lawyer could weigh in on this and give us your take on whether or not this met the criteria for class action. Gagné said that the court acknowledges the profoundly sad ongoing history of discrimination suffered by Black Canadians, and that plaintiffs have faced challenges in the public service. So we get that it was hard. We get that it was particularly enforced against you, but legally, this does not meet the requirement for class action. She does go on to say the plaintiffs didn't present an adequate litigation plan and that they failed to present grounds for the court to assert jurisdiction over the case. So, is Gagné an immediate enemy here, or is Gagné standing on law and reason, and those who are representing this class action just did not do enough of their homework, or they didn't present it sufficiently? You tell me what you think. We've posted the link below for you on this video at Love Bay Radio on YouTube, so you can read it yourself as always, and tell us what you think. Don't just hear Nadia's words. Tell me your opinion. I really want to hear what you have to say. The plaintiffs called the decision a major disappointment, as you could imagine. It was said that this was going to be a David and Goliath battle from the beginning. They already knew that. And while today's outcome is frustrating, it only strengthens our resolve. So maybe we will see another class action brought forward. Now, this is specific to Canada. I want to talk about major DEI repeal. And again, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I want to talk about major DEI repeal. A lot of these are American-based companies, but they're multinational corporations. So when they make a decision, it affects very many people across the world. Are you ready for this? Let's go. Because, yeah, this is interesting. This is starting from yesterday and going backward. Okay, so as of yesterday, March 22nd, 2025, Major League Baseball removed references to diversity from its career sites to ensure it complies with federal law, is what we're hearing, right? Victoria's Secrets. I'm calling the ones that I think most of us know. Warner Brothers, Discovery Channel, those people. Goldman Sachs, heard of them. Paramount, Bank of America, BlackRock, Citigroup, Pepsi, JP Morgan Chase, Coca-Cola, Deloitte, PBS, which Trump has repeatedly called for defunding, shuttered its diversity, equity, and inclusion office. And those who work in DEI roles have left the company, which PBS said in a memo to staff is to make sure it complies with Trump's anti-DEI executive orders. PBS friends brought us Sesame Street. Could you imagine a world without Sesame Street? Could you imagine a world without Maria and Gordon, and all of these people and this lovely multicultural mixture of New York City all on one stoop on a brownstone? Could you imagine PBS not having, shows that, again, like in Sesame Street, we learned about how to treat our friends who have disabilities. We learned about our friends who speak another language at home and how it feels for them. We learned about, little monsters who feel like they look different from everybody else. We learned so much about ourselves and those around us from Sesame Street. Could you imagine? Google. Yeah, Google, friends. Amazon. Yep. The Smithsonian Institution, oh my goodness, my friends, told employees its diversity office is closing as a first step to address Trump's new federal policy that declares DEI programs as dangerous and demeaning. The Smithsonian, the keeper of knowledge. How are you feeling about these names? What is happening as you hear these declarations about who has made public reports that they will no longer, under the pressure of being completely closed down, stand with and for persons who have been systemically excluded for years and generations? Target, friends. Yep. The FBI. I mean, I don't know. What did they have an option? I mean, they're kind of government, right? Meta, McDonald's, Walmart said it would abandon its DEI commitments, including winding down a Center for Racial Equity nonprofit it had founded in 2020 with $1 million 5-year commitment. Just gone. Not-for-profit work, just gone. Ceasing third-party sellers from offering certain LGBTQ-themed products on its website, no longer participating in the Human Rights Campaign, external surveys, and phasing out the term diversity, equity, and inclusion in company documents. Boeing has dismantled its global diversity, equity, and inclusion department and redirected its staff to its human resources department to focus on talent acquisition and employee experience. Do I need to continue? This is a depressing list. Molson Coors, Lowe's, Ford Motor Company, Jack Daniels, Harley Davidson, John Deere, Farm and Equipment, my friends. This is a growing list. How do you feel about this? So for those of us who are a bit on the bandwagon of, well, they can have their table. I don't mind if they have their table. I want to build my own table. Those of us who are in the diaspora, who live in the global north, we live in spaces that were not necessarily designed for us. And so therefore, all of this hard work to now include us and to celebrate diversity and to be more equitable has now met its exhaustion. And with massive edicts coming down from on high, bearing down on this work that has been going on for such a long time, it begs the questions, friends. What are you doing to take your business back where you came from, right? This may be one time that a racist slur might be useful. We should maybe take our business back where we came from. Did you consider that? Let's talk about doing business in the Caribbean. We've talked a bit before about taking business back to the continent of Africa. So we're going to talk a bit about taking business back to the Caribbean. And we're going to focus specifically on Barbados, which I have mentioned. That's where I'm from. And we're going to learn from the example of what's happening on the ground in the Caribbean that would encourage those of us in the diaspora, no matter your place of origin, to seek to do more business in the Caribbean. And so I am really pleased that I will be joined today by Sonia Marville-Carter. She is the head of business facilitation and advisory services of the commercial state-owned enterprise Business Barbados. a former diplomat, having represented the government and the people of Barbados in Canada as Consul General at Toronto from 2018 to 2024, where I had the great fortune of meeting her. Ms. Marville-Carter spent 9 years in the public sector in Barbados, working in several ministries as personal assistant to 2 ministers of government. She also worked for the United Nations as special assistant to the Assistant Secretary General and was based in New York. A graduate of the University of the West Indies with a master's in sociolinguistics and a diploma in business with emphasis on marketing, Sonia has 23 years experience in the private sector, having undertaken several significant roles in administration, marketing, human resources, public relations, publishing, sustainable development, and energy, and held portfolios of managing director of M3 Management Consultants, as well as human resources coordinator for LM Connections, Inc. During her tenure as Consul General, Sonia honed her trade, investment, and labor relations skills while assisting to identify and maximize trade, labor, and other economic opportunities of mutual benefit to both Barbados and Canada. With a working knowledge of both French and Spanish, très bien, muy bien, and having taught English language in Barbados, Sonia is no stranger to multilingual and multicultural environments and sees beyond any perceived language or cultural barriers in the pursuit of trade and investment opportunities for Barbados. So, doesn't matter what language you speak, all right? Si vous parlez en français, c'est bon ça, all right? Y si usted habla español, muy bien. Doesn't matter what you're speaking, you can do business in Barbados. Also, a cultural practitioner and quite adept in social media skills, I must agree, Sonia produced a web series during the COVID pandemic called For the Love of BIM, translated For the Love of Barbados. This 3-season web series with over 60 episodes kept the diaspora informed and shared investment opportunities, talent, as well as products and services offered by the diaspora in Canada and Barbadians at home. Having returned to Barbados, Sonia Marville-Carter has embraced her new role in business facilitation and advisory and strongly believes that Business Barbados, as the facilitation arm of Brand Barbados, can enhance Barbados's international appeal as an attractive investment destination while nurturing and creating a successful local entrepreneurial community here at home. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the formidable, the absolutely amazing, floored to be able to know her and consider her a friend, Sonia Marville-Carter, up to the stage, because you got some things to talk about, girl.
Nadia, thank you so very much. That was a mouthful, but I want to thank you for the invitation to be here, with Lambe and with your listeners and followers and having this conversation with your friends. Yes, happy to join you.
Yes, please. This is quite something, because when we first looked at having this conversation, yes, we wanted to be able to promote business in the Caribbean and business in Barbados. But then with everything that has happened in the last few weeks, it almost seems imperative. It almost seems as though it's no longer a good idea. It's the idea.
Right? Serendipitous even, right?
Yes, absolutely. And for me as a Barbadian owning a business in both Barbados and Canada, I can attest to the importance of being able to bring that knowledge and financing and all of that so that we're able to support local economy here and, like you said, build entrepreneurship. So we got to talk. Let's start with the entrepreneurs that are in the Caribbean before we talk about the diaspora trying to reconnect. Do you think entrepreneurs are sufficiently supported in the Caribbean? Do you think there's enough for growth outside of hustling to build a strong business?
I have to say, yes. At this point in time, they're supported. We can always do more. Even what we have now, of course, we can always do more. There there are lots of agencies and so forth in Barbados and within the Caribbean. So we have they're like pro-business policies. So Barbados is known for its pro-business policies, including like the low corporate taxes and tax incentives, and for foreign investors, and creating a favorable environment for business to thrive. There is the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme in Barbados, and this is undertaken by the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Community Empowerment, and this provides entrepreneurial opportunities for young people. So these are through initiatives like the Building Blocks program, and there's the Small Business Development Act as well that Barbados has. There's business facilitation. There's Barbados Youth Business as well. The Youth Business Trust, I'm sorry, it's BYBT. So that's the Barbados Youth Business Trust. And that provides like startup capital and business mentoring and networking and advising and marketing support services. So there are strategies, there are agencies, there is support. What I think we may need to do at this point in time is some more marketing of it, so that more people are aware of what is available to them.
Right. Because it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to know that it's there.
Yes.
To know you need it, which would be, some education as well, and then
Yes.
how to actually access it. So while these provisions are made, or do you think entrepreneurs themselves are seeking out the help? While you try to educate them, are they looking actively for the support?
I think they are, and this is through, like you said, education, because it's a continuous thing. We have to keep putting it out, because every day there's somebody else coming up with an idea. There's somebody else who's lying down in their bed and thinking, oh well, I probably could do this, or some idea just popped into my head, and they had not paid attention to any of the PSAs that had gone on before that. So every day people are thinking. And we want to keep it, we want to keep that information out there. We want to keep the education current, so that people know what's happening. So like I said, it's an ongoing process. What I would say as well is that, for instance, in Barbados, particularly, I know we didn't touch on this, but education, we said education, and I'm talking now about general education. So the curriculum, for instance, trying very hard we've done some work on that. There's more work to be done, but it kind of changes the trajectory for the student now, and opens their mind to new and exciting areas of endeavor. So like I said, it's creating, or hoping to create, more entrepreneurs, teaching the younger people in for instance, like there's lots of STEM. So we're looking very closely at STEM. You'll see a lot of that within the curriculum. Yes, coding and all of these things are coming up, and we're trying to encourage the youngsters, the young people, as they're, and anybody, I should say any age, because it really doesn't matter what age it is. We're trying to encourage them to just get with the program, understand what's happening in the world, know that it must be a case where, we have to all make a way for ourselves, and not everybody's going to go into and be employed. You may need to find your own way and be an entrepreneur. So we're trying to put that out there so everybody understands and everybody has an opportunity.
And just to clarify for our listeners and viewers, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
And math, yes.
I've had some interesting debate with my STEM colleagues as to whether or not it should be. So I know, have you heard the new term STEAM? That includes the A in art. Lots of debate over whether or not that's included. But STEM focuses on, more like the hard science and the math.
Exactly.
So you're saying then that with the education reform happening in Barbados specifically, that we're now not just looking at book knowledge, and just arithmetic, reading, writing, the usuals, but we're not just preparing for higher education only, but we're also having a new embedded focus on entrepreneurship as viable work for youth. That's what's coming down the pipeline.
Exactly. That is exactly what is coming down the pipeline. So, and I know we mentioned the arts, but there is, there's a new term out there as well, the orange economy, which pretty much promotes the creative entrepreneurship in the Caribbean. So that is all involved because we have the blue and green economy. We also have the orange economy. So we have a very colorful economy that we're trying to promote within the Caribbean. So it is so yes, because we recognize that there's not just a lot of talent, of course, within Barbados or within the Caribbean, but we have a lot to offer, and there's so much that we can achieve using the materials and the skill set that we have.
You know, I had an experience where another Caribbean person told my then 6-year-old daughter that she laughs like a market vendor. And I needed to have a conversation with this adult about why this particular statement was problematic. First of all, my daughter's laugh is her laugh. That's number one. But number two, why is the term market vendor being used as derogatory when it is indeed the market vendors who built our Caribbean economies to get us to where we are so that the rest of us could go to school and then turn our nose up at market vendors?
I would not have taken it as derogatory at all. I would have laughed even harder. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, to say that to a 6-year-old, you know, like she doesn't.
Yes.
I wasn't in the room when it was said, right? So I had to.
But did she know? Did she know what a market vendor was, or did you have to then explain to her what
I
that
had
was
to
about?
explain to her. The tone was indeed derogatory because she came home very upset, right?
Okay.
And my daughter was an entrepreneur from the time she was 4. So I had to reinforce for her that we look up to the market vendors, right? We don't take that tone. So I want to ask you, what are the cultural shifts? We talk about education shifts, but what are the cultural shifts that we need to now be able to prioritize entrepreneurship and business building coming out of, you know, statements and mindsets like that? Because many of us would not have looked at market vendors, hawkers, you know, whatever word we use, as entrepreneurs themselves. Mm-hmm. So what are the cultural shifts you think that we need to prioritize entrepreneurship?
Well, I will say that of course there needs to be a cultural shift, but I will say that I think it's already happening. It may still exist within a certain age group, but generally I think the younger generation, they're moving towards, like I said, they're very familiar now with the arts. They're very familiar with being able to make a living off of their art, their creation, you know, and like you said, the same vending. They're aware of this, and it is not looked down on in their area now. Some of the older generation, they still look down on those things, and they're still thinking we need to be mainstream. If you're not studying to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, you know, then you're really not doing anything. And maybe you should do whatever else you're doing within the arts or whatever is just a little side thing, you know, that kind of thing. They don't see it as mainstream. But I think more and more as we educate the public, because the public service announcements and the information being put out there is not just for the younger people. Like I said, it's for all ages. And once we or the older generation realizes as well, oh no, this is going to become mainstream. You know, these are things that can happen. No, you can see the billions of dollars that are being invested in these areas, the needs that we're going to have coming out of, because that's the other thing. I know I'm jumping a little bit, but that's the other thing with respect to education. The whole idea of that as well is to be forward thinking. The whole idea is not to be reactive, but to be proactive. So we don't get totally shaken by a COVID-19 pandemic. We look at it and we see how we can twist and turn, how we can maneuver, how we can pivot. And I think that's part of the whole education process, where you teach people to I know we've been saying it and it sounds very cliche, but you know, if you're given limes, make some lemonade kind of thing, you know, you're given lemons, make some lemonade. So not to see things as hindrances and not to be myopic in your viewpoint, but to open and expand your horizons and be able to see what is happening out there on a global scale, because that's the other thing. We are in Barbados 166 square miles, but we are global citizens. And that's because of the outreach of technology and everything else that's happening, that we can operate on a market, a larger market, especially through technology. So those are like, we go back to your question, which was the cultural shift. It needs to happen, but I think it has been happening. I think we do have a move away from that myopic view. You will still get a few people, you will still get some people, but if you really drill down and you ask them questions, they too will realize, yeah, I don't know why I said that, because when I think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think we are moving away, but that is important to ensure that we keep educating our populace. We keep educating, Barbadians, the Caribbean people in general, and to keep us moving forward.
Mhm, mhm. No, interesting. So if we're looking then at moving ourselves forward, being forward thinking, wider thinking, I have a family member that says he believes that why we in Barbados tend to be a bit short sighted is that from almost any point in the country, you could see the ocean on the horizon. And just that physical representation of the end of the land coming through the generations has brought this sense of, we can go but this far. And now we have CSME, the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, that says to us the water is not a division, it's not a separation, it's a continuum, right? Towards the rest of what is our shared existence as Caribbean people. What would you say are the pros and cons to CSME, especially along this line of improving business in the Caribbean?
Yeah, that is sorry, forgive me. I actually have somebody from Toronto keeps calling, trying to get my attention. I'm not sure. I don't think that they realize I am on the show at the moment, but yes. Um, right, you were asking me about the pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are, of course, pros and cons for CSME. I think for CSME, we're looking at an enlarged market. So these are the pros that I can see. We have an enlarged market. There are greater economies of scale, of course. We're looking at, increased competitiveness. And I know people may look at that and say it's not a pro, it is a pro. Increased competitiveness. We can also, I can see there can be improved standards of living throughout the Caribbean if, CSME is working at its best. There's obviously the free movement of not just skilled professionals and services, but of capital as well. And you're looking at, I don't know, protection of consumers. I know we have that within our as well. We have, each island has its own protection of consumers, but then you, as CSME, now you have a greater, because you have a bigger body. I am thinking, this is how I'm thinking that CSME will, can work if it is done, if everybody buys into it as they should. There are obviously vulnerabilities, and I would think like the cons, sorry, for CSME at this time would be uh, there may be challenges in implementation, and we can see that there may be challenges in implementation, and like for some of the smaller islands and so forth, you may get the progress is slow, and I think we see that now. The progress is slow because everybody's not at the same rate, and that's just how it is. Everybody is not at the same level, at the same rate, and the process can be slow. There may be some vulnerabilities within the smaller economies, and you may get, although I don't necessarily see this as a con, but you can have in some instances like job displacement, because you may get, for instance, one country being the hub for X, and that person and that the people who may have done it in their country, but they're now displaced, but the opportunity is now to move to that other island or country because of the free movement. So those are, generally those are the pros and cons that I think of right off the bat with respect to CSME.
Mm-hmm. And, I won't say how many years ago, but when I was still in school, just a hop on a throw years ago, when CSME, again, that's the Caribbean Single Market and Economy, which for those of us who are unfamiliar, think of it as like the African Union or the European Union, or NAFTA when it used to exist, and NAFTA to a lesser extent because it didn't have the free movement for jobs like the way how
Right.
it would be facilitated as simply in the Caribbean. But those multi country agreements that would allow labor and business to flow easily across the countries that are involved. So that's what CSME is in the Caribbean context. And so when CSME first started to be developed, there was a lot of concern. Barbadians were very concerned about a single dollar, right? Like the euro, for example, and what would happen if our strong dollar is devalued by somebody else's dollar. That was a big concern then, which we have not seen. Do you know if there's talk about having a single dollar in our shared economy?
Well, that hasn't resurfaced. That conversation has not resurfaced. We know that obviously there's the EC dollar within the Eastern Caribbean states, and but it has not resurfaced at this point in time. I know it will again, but that is one that has not resurfaced. I should say it's not on the table right at this moment that I am aware of.
All right. Then another thing that came up, you talked about job displacement. Oh, they're going to come and they're going to take our jobs. And then I left Barbados, lived in 3 other countries, and realized that a lot of that xenophobia that I heard my people spew is what I would then face as an immigrant somewhere else. How are we supporting the members of each country who aren't moving in terms of the shifts and being more welcoming of our brothers and sisters from right next door? But we still see them as foreign as if they come from across the planet. How are we encouraging the locals who stay to actually be more embracing of our brothers and sisters who are coming?
Well, I must tell you, Nadia, and I know you're aware, that's an uphill battle because it's just human nature. But I think at this point in time, I would like to say that it has gotten better. We in Barbados, having returned home recently as well. And well, I mean, I've always been coming and going, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that there are more of our Caribbean brothers and sisters are being embraced and here en masse. You can when you look at the stats and the breakdown of our population now, when you see the stats, you see that it has increased in terms of the number of say, for instance, Jamaicans, Guyanese, Trinidadians or so that are on island that live in Barbados and exist here. And I think that as Barbadians have moved into the Caribbean themselves, the families of those people who have moved, I think, have realized, well, my family is now in Trinidad or they're now working and wherever. And I obviously would not want anybody to give them a hard time because of that. I want to go and visit. When I go visit, I want to feel like I'm at home. And I think that across the board, that has started to trickle down. And I use the term not loosely at all, trickle, but I think we're seeing a bit more of, and I think it just stemmed from, I mean, just what xenophobia stems from. People just being scared of the unknown and just thinking of, thinking like, oh no, I'm gonna lose everything. But I think more and more people are realizing that is not the case. It can really be a win-win situation, and not just within the Caribbean, but we have, our Caribbean people and Barbadians. Let me speak for Barbadians right now. Barbadians are moving out into the world in general. There's always a saying, there's nowhere anywhere you can go and not find a Bajan. So there, wherever the farthest corners of the universe you go to, you're gonna find a Bajan there. So I think we're embracing that a bit more and recognizing that we need to unite. We really do need to unite, and it is important that we do this in order to springboard, in order to in order to get ahead. And all the things you were talking about initially, I mean, even if we didn't think about it that much before, we have to think about it now, because the North is thinking now about more South, South collaborations and trading more with the South. So, we have to realize that we come together. And I will say that, as having been Consul General at Toronto, that the Caribbean Consular Corps, we bonded. We had a vibrant Caribbean Consular Corps because we realized that as a single island or country, we didn't really stand a chance. But once we bonded together and we were known as the Caribbean. So, for instance, within our deliberations, when you have 109, when you have approximately 109 countries represented in Toronto, and I say Toronto and not Ottawa for obvious reasons, because Toronto is the business capital, and you have more consular posts in Toronto than you do in Ottawa. So you have like about 109 countries represented, and you're up against, like I said, the world as a block, as a Caribbean block. We also we were, most of our meetings we went to as a Caribbean unit. So the Caribbean Consular Corps, we were together and we worked together for the benefit of our islands. Yes, we all separate islands, but we worked together. So when we got something for the Caribbean, it meant it trickled to everybody, all of the islands that were connected within that.
Do you think CSME would allow the Caribbean to rival BRIC, for example? And let me spell it out: Brazil, Russia, India, China, for our listeners. Do you think we'd be strong enough? We don't have that much land, certainly not that much population once you include China, but could we become formidable and known widely as BRIC has been able to turn themselves around?
In all, in all honesty, Nadia, it is not impossible. It is not impossible. We are, I think, now as eyes are turning towards other lands outside of the traditional spaces that people would have been looking to, you never know what can emerge. And I think that as we continue to grow as we continue to unite, once we unite, anything is possible. I'm not saying it would be easy. I'm not saying it's not an uphill battle. I'm not saying that, that we don't have challenges, of course. And you mentioned a lot of them before. We talk in numbers, we're talking land size, we're talking, natural resources, we're talking whatever else. We don't have that en masse, but I wouldn't count us out completely. And it may not happen in my lifetime, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, Russia is the largest country on the planet, but it's a lot of snow up there. I mean, you put Guyana, Suriname, Brazil, Jamaica, Trinidad, Cuba, and Hispaniola, which is the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. You put all them together, we got some decent land,
Yeah.
and a lot of volcanic.
Yes, especially if you're adding Suriname and Guyana to it. Yes, of course.
Exactly, right. I mean, we got something there. And I think it's really now about our people seeing that as a possible future. While we continue to have these, my country, your country, type of, which was a natural part of nation building. It's like a side effect. We needed to build strong identity and culture in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we did it so well that now we're having a hard challenge recognizing that, we were doing it next to each other. We should have been doing it together.
Yes.
And so with CSME continuing to go forward, I mean, I must say I had a bit of duality when I visited Barbados and I heard so many accents. It just kind of jumped me for a minute. I was like, there are a lot of different accents here. And I took some time and I realized, I loved when I went to New York City and heard different accents and languages, when I went to Toronto and heard different accents and languages. And now I get to experience that at home,
Yeah. And if you really think about it, Nadia, if you think about it, like if you listen to all of the news reports, so we're talking about the schools, like especially around this time when you're having school sports, and you listen to the reports and you hear the names of the children and you hear the names of the families that are represented. For those of us over 50 years old, you would realize that a number of them are not the names that you recognize as typical Barbadian names. They are, and these are students and people who were born in Barbados, but you realize that their families were originally from St. Lucia, Dominica, Trinidad, Guyana, wherever else. And the names, you realize that now because they're not typical, even within the workplace now. You're getting applications coming in, and when you look at the names on the radios, on CBC television, when you hear the names of the reporters, the young people coming in, they're not typical Barbadian names, and that speaks to the fact that there is a lot of movement within the Caribbean, and of course right here in Barbados.
Yes, and it's something that we, should celebrate that level of movement, right? I mean, the Guyana booth at AgriFest was a point of celebration for many of us to see our sister country, where a lot of them are descendants of Barbadians who went to Guyana many generations ago, and so to see that level of partnership, do you think with that intra-regional xenophobia, I'm reminded of Dr. Eric Williams comment, 10 minus 1 is 0. When we made this attempt at bringing the Caribbean together before. If you don't know who Dr.
Yeah, the
Eric
Federation back in the
Yes.
what was it, 1958 or somewhere back there? Yes.
Yeah, late 50s, right?
Yes.
So go make sure you Google Dr. Eric Williams and find out more about him. But, do you think we have any vulnerabilities that might develop a Brexit within the Caribbean? Are there any pulls away from this movement together?
Well, what I will say, and I mean, this is quite obvious. So this is not, this, like I said, is obvious. Everything depends on the politics of the day of the particular territories, because whoever is the governing body at the time, it depends on how they would want to move things. Right now, like I said, well, coming out, if we do a little history, coming out of the Federation, although that collapsed, coming out of the Federation was then CSME, because that was what was proposed coming out of the collapsed Federation. So yes, it has not taken off as we would like, but we do have a CARICOM secretariat, we do have movement, we do have all of these things happening. And yes, there will be there still will be some fear. Some people may be thinking, just like you said, we all have to, the governments, of course, are lean heavily, of course, on their people and what their public is saying as well. So it will depend on the strength of the politics of the day within the various territories. Right now, everybody seems to be very happy to continue with CSME and to ensure its success. And I personally think that it will continue that way. Let me just say that I think it will continue. I don't foresee any immediate withdrawal, anybody coming out or really making a major problem with it at this point in time.
Okay, good. Let's keep it going, Caribbean people. We got places to go and things to do.
That's right.
So we don't want any of that behavior. But if there's something to be aware of, we should, be looking at it with open eyes. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a possibly dangerous political question. Can
I plead the fifth?
You're not in America, so no. Given some of what we have seen in the Caribbean. So I am particularly proud of Barbados becoming a republic, which has been in conversation from pretty much the beginning, but it took our first female PM to actually make it happen, just saying. But, this has been in conversation for such a long time. And even Scotland is still running their referendum every here and there, a few years. I remember Grenada went to referendum in the early 2010s, mid 2010s. around this with previous PM Mitchell, who is apparently not family to current PM Mitchell. But anyways, we'll see how that goes. And well, Grenada voted against moving to a republic at that time. Should Caribbean islands, now that we have the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, right? So we no longer need the Privy Council as highest court. We have CSME, we have the CARICOM Secretariat, we have so much infrastructure in place. Should more Caribbean territories become republics?
I must tell you, no. A little disclaimer. This is just Sonia. No, this is a response from Sonia, and this is just what I think. I think that once again, it has to be the political will. To give a little history, if we go back, so we're talking about Barbados having gained republic status in 2021. Barbados was independent from 1966. It is said that at the time that this is what, or what we call our father of independence, Errol Barrow, he would have wanted this from the beginning, but it was not necessarily palatable to masses. We needed to have a period of time where people could get accustomed and realize that, yes, we can run our own affairs. Yes, we can do the things we need. Because, I mean, for those of your friends listening, if you're not really sure, a republic, the basic definition of a republic is just as a form of government in which people elect and choose their leaders. And we in the Caribbean have been doing that for a long time. Most people have been doing that for a while. The only difference is, like I said, would be with respect to the republic, is that no, the Queen is not head of state. The Queen is no longer head. So you would have had, for instance, we've been paying all our own bills. We've been handling our money. We've been handling our finances, having our prime minister and so forth. But at that before, you had the governor general, who would have been the representative of, well, in our case, the Queen. There's now a king, but we're a republic now, so it would have been of the Queen at the time. So I would say, so going back to your question, I think it has to be the political will of the governments of the particular territories, and they have to go, if they choose to go the way of referendum, then they have to listen to what their people want. But I think eventually more and more territories will go the way of republic. I know that Jamaica has been having the discussion as well. They've been really pushing towards that. You mentioned Grenada had a referendum and they voted against it, but it will resurface at some point in time. So I think more and more people will go that way, but I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't. They just need to do, they have to look at their particular territories and see what is best for them and their people. But for Barbados, the way was republic for us.
Mm-hmm. And that was Sonia's still diplomatic response. But Nadia says, come on, Jamrock. Let's push this thing through. But yes, Sonia, before we end, and I share a little bit about how people can start a business in the Caribbean as a resource, what do you think is one thing that Caribbean people need to do today to improve the economic reality in the region?
Well, educate. And that is it. I think that is a major thing that we need to do. We need to keep educating our people. We need to, and our people need to seek knowledge. So keep seeking that knowledge, because that's the only way that I can see our economies thriving and growing, because the knowledge will put us into, like I said, the entrepreneurial skill sets and the businesses that we would need to grow our economies. So yes, I would have to say that education is going to be the main thing that we should be looking to do to improve the economic reality in the Caribbean region. We just have to educate and prioritize the education and invest in education and skills. And I think that's what we need to do.
Sonia, thank you so very much for joining us here on Community Conversations. I'm so thankful to have had your expertise and your smile brought to the people of Love Bay Radio, your number one Afrobeat music and talk radio online and through the airwaves. Thank you so very much, Sonia, for being here and joining us.
Thank you, Nadia, for having me. And thank you, Love Bay, for inviting me. It was a pleasure being here and having this chat with you and your friends.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, if you enjoyed this, please make sure that you let us know. You can send us a message through WhatsApp. You can connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, X, used to be Twitter. Make sure that you are letting people know that they can listen and watch these conversations over and over again on YouTube at Love Bay Radio. I'm very quickly going to take us into our community come along, because a lot of people want to know, okay, Nadia, so you said that business could be great in the Caribbean, but what does that actually look like? I don't know. How am I supposed to start a business in the Caribbean? I'm not there. So let's go over. I'm sharing my screen with you so that you can see this website called investincaribbean.org. And the link has been posted for you. So no matter where you're listening to us, hop on over to YouTube at Love Bay Radio so that you can get the link for yourself. This is where you have access to all of the opportunities to create business in the Caribbean all in one place. So you would see that different Caribbean territories, some are English speaking, French speaking, Spanish speaking, Curacao speaks Papiamento, Dutch, English. I mean, I have a family member from Papiamento, from Curacao, and the number of languages that they speak is just so fascinating. So you have lots of different opportunities to be able to work and create and develop business in the Caribbean. And, it's one of those chicken and egg kind of situations, because on the one hand, we need businesses to start and do well so that these structures can be put in place. And then we also need these structures to be in place so businesses can do well. So, it's a bit of both going back and forth, but we need these opportunities to work for us so that we can continue to create new opportunities as well. So you can get in touch with the CAIPA Secretariat. It's secretariat at investincaribbean.org. All right. And this website here gives you a portal into all of the other. So here's Invest Barbados, which will sit in Business Barbados. And here we have opportunities for you to go to, the specific country you're interested in, learn all the facts that you need, examine all of the opportunities for business. All right. Here is another one. Cayman Islands. That has to be pretty cool. I would have, that would be nice. So here's the Cayman Islands website, gov.ky. All right. And again, lots of information sharing, lots of solid data that you can use to find out whether or not this is the place for you to develop new business. So come along, community. All right. It's time for us to put our money where our mouths are and actually do some of this work. Back where we find our roots. And I just want to make sure that you remember Sonia talked about the shift in mentality coming through our youth. More youth are, investing in business opportunities and becoming entrepreneurs. So make sure that you are following up on when and how to get involved in the Voices of the Millennials annual conference is coming up in July of 2025. So make sure you go over to the Love Bay Radio website to get up-to-date information. Stay tuned on our Instagram as well to get more information so that you can register. Or if you are nowhere near Toronto, you can also sponsor a young person to attend. Think about that. Buy a ticket and give it away. Let someone else go so that they can be a part of this momentous occasion. My friends, thank you so very much for joining us here on Community Conversations. Love Bay has been bringing these real conversations to the table so we can actually talk about it and make sure that we are not just putting our heads in the sand, but we are facing things together so that we can build together. That's the reason for it, right? Not just to sit down and feel bad, but to actually figure out how we can do something about it, my friends. So, as always, while we get to the doing, we have to take time to stop and think and talk about it. And that's why we have these community conversations. So, my friends, I encourage you, as always, to keep the conversation going.